Congressman Dean Phillips. He's a Democrat from Minnesota. He is co-vice chair of the Bipartisan House Problem Solvers Caucus. Congressman, thanks so much for taking the time this morning.
Good to be with you, Jim.
I want to ask you about the response to this. You saw the White House press secretary's response yesterday, clearly not happy with Joe Manchin. Now you see Chuck Schumer wants to force a vote on this, basically to make Joe Manchin go thumbs down on this in public. Is that smart? Does the White House want to make an enemy of Joe Manchin?
Jim, I don't think so. In my life experience, putting people in that position, condemnation and vitriol, doesn't usually result in the outcome that we desire. And let me assure you, I'm terribly disappointed. Many of us, including the senator, have been working hard for months on this. But let me assure everybody watching that I believe this is the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. And I'm troubled by the response to it because I think these condemnations will only harden his heart. And I, as the vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, am on a mission, along with my colleagues, at least Democratic colleagues right now, to find some common ground on this and ensure it does get done. So I want people to keep the faith.
Tell us what that mission plan is. There is now this idea of breaking it up, in effect. Start with the most urgent needs, things you know you could get support for. What are those first steps? Do you start, for instance, with a child tax credit?
Well, first, I know Senator Manchin to be a man of his word. And I believe, based on his public comments and his work so far on both this and the Freedom to Vote Act, which we should also talk about, he has intention to get these done. He doesn't like how the Build Back Better Act looks right now. So how do we proceed? We sit down, we identify what his misgivings are specifically, and try to find a way to reconcile this. You know, our system of government,
paint a picture for me, though.
Well know,
paint a picture, because you and the Problem Solvers Caucus have been trying to find a way forward for months, right? And you know, Biden seemed to believe that Manchin could get there. Manchin expressed some public hope that he could get there. And keep in mind, I want to acknowledge there are other senators, Sinema among them, who've expressed reservations along the way. Paint me a picture. What is it? Give me an idea where there's overlap here in interests.
Well, let's start with conversation versus condemnation. Yes, there are elements of it that he is not thrilled with. And look, we have to inject some pragmatism into the circumstance. We have a system of government that makes this tedious. It's designed to make change difficult. And boy, we are witnessing that right now. So let's recognize what we need. We need him, plain and simple. We need his vote. So all of those who are throwing fire at him, do so at our collective peril. So we have to sit down in January, you know, clear our heads and our hearts a little bit. There is a path forward, and I have faith that we will get this done. And I would ask that the White House and fellow Democrats who are disappointed, and I'm among them, by the way, Jim, I'm terribly disappointed. But if we wish to still accomplish this, my message is simple. Let's not give up. We have 10 months until the next election with the current very thin majorities in place. Let's not give up. And in my experience, the way many of my colleagues are approaching this, I'm afraid, will result in exactly what we do not want, which is nothing.
Is there a possibility, I don't want to get too far out on a limb here, of Republican support for some of these individual measures? For instance, on prescription drug costs. I mean, that, by the way, is something that the Trump administration had pursued in a Republican-controlled Congress, or on other issues such as paid family leave. There are a couple Republican lawmakers who have expressed support for that. Do you see that as a possibility in this environment, or is that pie in the sky?
Well, one would think that, first of all, most of the elements of Build Back Better are wonderfully supported by most Americans. One would think that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would be supportive of a lot of it. I believe they are. Certainly in private they are. Politics gets in the way of everything. But I do believe, yes. And one of the great challenges and problems in our system right now, Jim, is that we package these massive measures together. We don't allow the input of rank-and-file members in either the House or Senate. And I'm afraid we're not using a process that results in the best outcomes and, frankly, the most expeditious ones. The answer is yes. I do believe there are elements to separate and perhaps vote on independently. But I do believe collectively the Build Back Better Act is very important the way it is positioned right now. So I think it's unlikely, sadly, that we will get Republicans to join. I think it's worth an effort, but the most expeditious, likely path forward is to reconcile this with Mr. Manchin. I do believe it's possible.
Okay.
And I hope some months from now, it might be only one, it could be a few, that we're back together celebrating a great success for the country.
Let me ask you this. You know the headwinds in the midterms are already strong against Democrats. Just look at the polling on a generic ballot. Without passing at least some of this, even in a pared down form, maybe an individual measure here, an individual measure there, are Democrats in for a real storm in the midterms otherwise?
Well, if Democrats don't set down the swords and start more conversation with one another and recognizing where we have common ground and shared objectives and supporting one another, then I think, yeah, we're in deep trouble. But at the end of the day, I'm one of many of my colleagues who didn't come to Washington to be perpetual members of Congress. We came here to get good work done. This Congress is already one of the most productive in recent memory. If we can pass this, it will be, during my lifetime, the most productive Congress, perhaps in history. That's something that we can all hang our hats on. It is possible. For those who are looking at November, I say shame on them. We're here to do work right now. We have to get through COVID. We have to maintain this economy. And most importantly, recognize that if we don't start building bridges to one another, we've got far bigger problems than COVID, than climate change, and then our economy. And it is my job, it's incumbent on all of us, to take a breath over these holidays, look at each other's hearts and heads a little bit with more fondness and respect, and do better. And that, to me, is our foremost mission. I think we're going to do it. I'm optimistic.
I hear you. Do better. On the Hill?
Do better.
And in family Christmas parties as well. Congressman Dean Phillips, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim.